Hi guys, welcome to this set of videos, and what we're going to do here in this set of videos with these notes is talk a little bit about what is known as the mid-segment of a triangle. Now we just got done talking about points of concurrency and looking at the points of concurrency, how you find them, right? And then the properties of those points of concurrency. Mid-segment, well, mid-segments are not points of concurrency. Mid-segments are not going to intersect. However, we still put mid-segment into sort of the same grouping with those points of concurrency, or at least this is a great time to talk about it because we're still drawing lines inside of a triangle, right? And so it fits pretty well here. Before we go ahead and talk about mid-segment and what it is, let's get our essential question. What is it that we'd like you to be able to do or answer by the time we get to the end of this set of videos? And that simply is this. How are segments that join midpoints of the triangle's sides related to the sides of a triangle? Really important question, and one that we certainly would like you to be able to answer. Now, in order to answer that essential question, there's a few things that you need to know, some things that we need to be able to do. That's going to be our objectives or learning targets. In this case, you guys would first need to be able to identify those mid-segments, right? Those segments that are connecting the midpoints between sides of a triangle. So you need to be able to find those mid-segments. And then finally, right, we can use those mid-segments to identify unknown lengths and side measures. Essentially, we're going to do a little bit of algebra. All right, I give you a diagram, we give you some information about the diagram, and you can use geometry and algebra to figure out the rest of it. Here we go, let's just jump right into this. First, mid-segment. Really not too terrible, too tricky an idea. It's simply this. The mid-segment of a triangle, oh, I want my highlighter, there it is. It's a line segment, it's going to be a line segment that connects the midpoint of two sides of a triangle. Now remember, a point of concurrency. Point of concurrency was where three or more lines intersect. Here's why a mid-segment will not be a point of concurrency. If I draw a triangle, and again, this is just going to be a rough sketch, but I'm connecting the midpoints of a triangle. So let's say the midpoint of A, B, and C. I'll draw those midpoints. Maybe right about there is the midpoint between A and B. Right about there is the midpoint between B and C. And right about there is the midpoint between A and C. I will have three mid-segments. I'll have this one that connects the midpoints between AB and BC. I'll have this one that connects the midpoints between BC and CA. There's another mid-segment. And then finally, this one, which connects the midpoints, right, between AB and AC. Right? So three mid-segments. But please notice, at most I have a point where two of them intersect, but at no point do I have all three mid-segments intersecting. That's why mid-segment does not count as a point of concurrency, right? I don't have all three mid-segments intersecting. In fact, you never will. So it's not a point of concurrency. But there's still a lot of unique properties here when it comes to mid-segments, and we'll talk about those in just a second. Why mid-segments are important and we want to talk about them really has a lot to do with sort of structurally what is going on. Whenever you have a triangle, the best way to add support to that triangle, or to add what we would call rigidity to the structure, is to put in a mid-segment cross brace. It'll really make that triangular structure much more rigid, a lot more stable. And so constructionally speaking, that's really where mid-segments are going to come in. Now, properties of mid-segments. All right, here we go. When it comes to mid-segments, first and most importantly, remember that these mid-segments connect midpoints. Right, so this point right here, D, is the midpoint of AB. Why is that important? Well, midpoint means it splits it into two congruent segments. Same thing for F. It's the midpoint. So it'll split BC into 2 congruent segments. That's going to be really important later on when we're trying to solve for unknown measures, knowing that these are midpoints and it splits the side into 2 congruent segments. Really, really important. But there's actually more than that. And I talk about that right here. Let me highlight it for you. In our definition, the segment joining midpoints of 2 sides of a triangle parallel to the third side. So let me put that in there. The mid-segment and the third side are going to be parallel. They're parallel to each other. And also, the mid-segment is half the length of that third side, which simply means this. Oh, I wrote a B and I need a D. DF. This guy right here, this mid-segment, every time will be half the length of the opposite side, the side that's parallel to it, in this case, side AC. So DF is equal to 1/2 AC. So a couple of really important things here. First, because they're midpoints, it splits the side into 2 congruent segments, right? The mid-segment and the third side are going to be parallel, and the mid-segment will be half the length of the side that it's parallel to. Now, it goes a little bit further than that. There's a lot more relationships we need to talk about. What I've done is I've taken triangle ABC, and I have drawn my 3 mid-segments. I've drawn my 3 mid-segments. So let's run through this. First, as far as congruent sides go, please notice D is a midpoint. So that means that BD will be congruent to AD, right? It has to be. D is a midpoint. Okay, awesome. Same thing over here. E is a midpoint, so AE will be congruent to CE. Awesome. Keep going. F is a midpoint, so once again, BF will be congruent to FC. Now, here's what's awesome. Here's what's awesome. Watch this. So awesome. Remember, the mid-segment is half the length of the side that it's parallel to. Okay, let's start DE. So mid-segment DE, right, is parallel to BC. What is the length of DE? It's half the length of BC. So let's write that. DE is 1/2 BC. But look, F splits BC in half, right? This is half of BC. So what that means then is DE is also congruent to both of those segments. Same thing happens here. Let's go to the next one. This guy right here, this mid-segment, EF, parallel to AB. So here's what we know. I know that EF is half the length of AB. But point D splits AB in half. Right? That is half of AB, which means EF is congruent to both of those segments. Oh yeah, I know. Geometry. Amazing. Amazing. Just wait, it gets better. You're gonna love this. Again, you guys can do it with the third side. At this point, I think you see it. Side DF is gonna be half side AC, but point E splits AC in half, which simply means DF will be congruent to both of those segments. Okay, now the angles. And this gets even better. Check this out. What you've got is a triangle drawn by the midsegments. Those midsegments form a triangle where the measure of the angles will be the same as the angle opposite it. Here's what I mean. This angle right in here, angle D, is going to be exactly the same measure as the angle opposite from it in the larger triangle. So D will be congruent to C. D will be congruent to C. Same thing here. Angle F will be congruent to the angle opposite from it in the larger triangle. So F and A are going to be congruent angles. Put the double arc in there. Oh, that is not a good arc. Hang on. Great. And then finally, angle E will be congruent to angle B. 3 arcs and 3 arcs. All right, so we've got relationships flying around all over the place here when it comes to mid-segments, and I think you can probably already begin to imagine the way that these problems are going to go when I start asking you to solve for unknowns, right? I mean, just relationships all over, and I know it can be a lot to remember. We'll get lots of practice here together doing problems as well as in the homework, and of course if you're taking this class with me, a quiz and a practice test and just lots of places to get practice to help you remember all of these relationships. So with that in mind, let's head on over to the next page of the notes. We'll try a few of these problems together. I'll meet you there.